Thank you, Jim. We got everyone's attention now. I'd like to welcome everyone to the WACO meeting, and looks like it's nice and warm outside, warming up. Probably water demands are going to increase, but we can cope with it. Well, before we start, I'd like to call upon Tom Coughlin, who's going to lead us in the pledge.
Please stand. Join with me in pledging the greatest nation in the world. Please begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Tom. Okay, a couple of announcements. You see on the screen that our April meeting is going to be held at the Orange County Sanitation District, which is just down the street, you might say. And you have two options of going in the front entrance, or you can climb over the fence, as they're right next door to us. And they're I guess, going to be remodeling this boardroom shortly, so change in location. You'll get many reminders about the change in location, and if you totally forget, there'll be a sign on the door on April 1st that we're meeting at the Sanitation District. Do we have any...
Make sure he pays. You tell him I told him.
Any new people or people possibly that have not been here for a while?
I would like to introduce a very nice young lady, Sherry Dunbar.
Oh, okay. Welcome.
I'd like to welcome Mike Spransky to the WACO meeting.
Hi, Mike. Do we have any legislative staff here? Yes, hi. Thank you. Nice to have you here. Okay, as our next presenter will be Linda Ackerman from MWD.
That's my first applause. Good morning. I'll start with a little bit of good news, and probably most of you have heard this. As of 2 days ago, the Sierra snowpack is at 130% of normal. Not quite as good, but okay. The Colorado snowpack is at 103% of normal. DWR, however, likes to remind us that we need to have a statewide average of 150% for conditions to improve, and that doesn't include improvement in groundwater. DWR also increased our allocation from 10% to 15%. At the January Bay Delta Committee meeting at Metropolitan, we received a really thorough update on the California water fix. You remember that was the BDCP. Roger Patterson reported that DWR had released a draft report of the management and design and construction of the Cal Water Fix. He also reported that the State Water Board will conduct hearings in April on the petition to add the new points of diversion from the Sacramento River. You might remember that we moved them way up the river. The design and construction enterprise will operate under a program director. They will be responsible for this design and construction, and it will operate under DWR authority, and that authority and program will sunset after the project completion. Matters that affect the conveyance project itself must have concurrence of the JPA members, which will consist of the state water contractors. The JPA will hire the director. The design construction enterprise will be staffed with DWR staff people, consultants, and staff from other public water agencies. DWR will have the final decision-making authority. The ESA and EPA permit decision should come out in the middle of 2016. Flow criteria hearings will be held after July. Cost allocation discussions, I'm getting over. yet another cold. Cost allocation discussions amongst the contractors are still ongoing, but becoming more focused. Delta smelt surveys conducted mid-January showed a slight take of smelt. Flow was good and there was no turbidity, which attracts the smelt. Nonetheless, Fish and Wildlife cut back our pumping considerably. If we had had the tunnel conveyance today during these cutbacks, well, actually, these cutbacks would not have been ordered. We would have been at maximum flow of the 9,000 CFS in the tunnels. As it stands today, we've lost just about, or a little over, 200,000 acre-feet to the Pacific. As most of you know, Metropolitan has an Agriculture and Industry Committee, or if you don't, I wanted to talk about it just a little bit. That committee is relatively new. Well, maybe 2 years. It's chaired by our own director, Dick, and I don't think I see him here this morning. This is industry and ag, and Larry has been putting together trips up and down the state, looking at different agricultural areas and industry. Interestingly enough, and I thought I'd bring it up since I haven't talked about it before, he did a trip to Fabrica, which is a very large carpet manufacturer here in Orange County. Their dyeing process takes several dye and wash cycles. They use a lot of water. They now recapture and reuse this water on site, and they've been able to reduce their water use by 34%. This is something they worked with the city of Santa Ana throughout this whole process, and they were very happy to have achieved this so they could stay in Orange County. At the Water Planning and Stewardship meeting this month, it was reported that Met had 900,000 acre-feet of dry air storage. At the time, we were looking at the possible extension. I missed something. Well, I'll just ad lib. At any rate, at the end of December, we had 900,000 acre-feet of dry year storage, which is okay, but it certainly wouldn't help us if the drought continued. The Met Conservation Program to date at Metropolitan, we have paid out $233 million in rebates, primarily turf rebates. We have approved $171 million more, and we have $24 million outstanding. We have some applications that have dropped, and when they free up, there will be some people on the waiting list who can move up and accept that money. And as you know, we're not taking any new applications. Through a Department of Interior grant, this is interesting, Met has a new program called the Innovative Idea Grant, How to Save Water. This is a $400,000 grant, and now Met has 13 projects within this program. The EPA may add some money as well to the program, which would be great. They could expand it. So these are entrepreneurial ideas. Some of the ideas involve a new type of large dishwasher for large cafeteria-style kitchens that saves water. There are apparently some very new sprinkler head types that will save large amounts of water. And then they're working on some residential apps on smartphones aimed at saving water. I think this will be an interesting program to watch. I think it's wise of us to tap the public, innovative, entrepreneurial spirit out there. So I'm looking forward to seeing the results from that. We have an update on the cost allocation for the tunnel project. The Bureau of Rec is engaged with the state contractors, which is good, and they're looking at cost shares across the board, 60-40, 40-60, 50-50, et cetera. They're looking at all options. We moved 1.18 million acre-feet of water on the Colorado River this year. A full aqueduct, as you know, is 1.2, so that water is saving our bacon. The Salton Sea is on the governor's radar. You may have read he has put $80 million into his budget this year for the sea. He wants quarterly updates on the Salton Sea this year, so we may see some action there. As I indicated at last month's WACO meeting, Met will begin their budget workshops next week. We had an update actually at a caucus meeting yesterday from our treasurer, Gary Breaux. We'll dig into that, and we hope to vote on that budget in April. And that's it for Met. And now for the infamous, ever elusive, strange water fact. Is Pierre here? You can't answer.
Linda, you got to pay me for this.
I know. That's true. I'll stop saying it. Did you know that the expiration date on a bottle of water is not for the water? But in fact, it's for the bottle itself, which can the plastic can leach chemicals into the water, which will make the water taste somewhat less than mountain spring fresh.
Very good, Linda. Now to the main event of our meeting today. Our speaker today, everyone knows, Tim Quinn. And just a little bit of background on Tim. I know you, probably all of you, are very aware of his background, but I'll refresh. And we know Tim is by education for his 3 degrees with his PhD in economics from UCLA. And then he... Pardon me? Yeah. All right. And then in mid-1980s, he went to work at the Metropolitan Water District as a principal economist. And as it turns out, I was in the same group that Tim was in. I think we were working for Wiley Horn. And then after a relatively short period of time, he moved to Sacramento for MWD to take care of MWD's Bay Delta issues. And he was there for probably about 10 years, and he was a deputy general manager at that point. And then an offer came along to be the executive director at ACWA, and Tim took that and moved to be able to stay residing in the Sacramento area, and certainly very successfully managed ACWA and its many activities. Just to see if you're in a friendly crowd or not, Tim, and I know you are, nothing but great remarks, but those of you that your agency is a member of ACWA, why don't you raise your hand? Yeah. We do have consulting engineers and those and council members, so you're not likely to get 100%. So anyways, with that introduction, and I know Tim has some excellent comments on ACWA and its activities and goals for this current year. Also, during the course of Tim's presentation, think of questions you'd like to ask Tim, and doesn't have to necessarily relate to 1916, but feel free. Tim is very open, he said, to answering any questions or making any thoughts known to others. So, Tim, please join us.
I am here PowerPointless. I didn't take a lot of time to create formal remarks. I do want to touch base on a number of issues that you've heard of before, but what I really wanted to do is get to the questions and comments from you. I've been coming down here for a long time. First time I wandered down, Orange County is one of the places where I got infected by the water bug. Late 1970s, 1978, I was interested in water and groundwater, and I came down, and a man named Niguel Klein, who many of you know, I guess, was very generous with his time. And I was fascinated by the way you manage this groundwater basin. This is, I was in my 20s working on a PhD dissertation. I developed mathematical models of the Basin Equity Assessment Program that really fascinated Niguel, and it was a major part of my indoctrination. I'm not sure where Orange County Water District was then, or MODOC was then, but this was just the headquarters of OCWD at the time. So, and I'm guessing the first time I appeared before WACO was 30 years ago. So I feel like I'm amongst friends who are not afraid to give me a hard time and ask the hard questions. So let's get to it. I got to start with what's happening with the state board and their emergency regulations. I want to use a historical analogy for you. I mean, we're on that highway of the history of California water, and I would suggest we've just had an accident and been driven off the road by a car driven by a crazy regulator. But the damage is not that bad. Nobody is injured. We've got AAA. We've been paying insurance premiums for a quarter century, and I'm pretty sure we're going to get back on the road and we'll be in relatively good shape over the long term. I do think it's useful. I did a blog about this about a week ago or so. I've been blogging and op-editing to put this into historical context. Most of us, how many of you were managing water back in 1987 to 1992 when the last big drought hit? A lot of us. If you think, the contrasts are telling, if you ask me. I'm an amateur historian. One of the first things I did for the Metropolitan Water District as a young economist, I did reliability studies. They'd never been done before for Metropolitan, and those studies showed that as long as you were counting on the state water project, which that was the plan 30 years ago, was complete the state water project, that you had about a 50% chance of shortage, and we did more economic analysis to suggest that the people that paid the bills really valued the reliability that you did not have back in the 1980s. And sure enough, 1987, I'd been at MWD 2 years at that point in time. A drought that hydrologically, this one's hotter, but hydrologically they look a lot alike, came along, and we were all water short. So what did we do? We had to go to rationing. I had my staff do some investigating, and it turns out 80 agencies all around the state of California, north, south, almost all of them were urban, they declared mandatory rationing at the local level. They didn't need the state to order them to do that. They knew they didn't have the water, and they had to do something to get their demands down to meet the supply that they did have. They went to rationing. The state considered statewide rationing back in 1990-91, they wisely decided not to do that, to leave that decision to the locals. So you got rationing happening where it needed to, where it was covering a shortfall, and it didn't happen where it wasn't needed to. The state's role, and I was right in the middle of this, the state's role was supply augmentation. We developed something we called the Drought Water Bank. That water bank started on a Tim Quinn napkin sitting across the table from a man named Tom Clark at a restaurant in a hotel in Oakland, California. And the concept was pretty simple. Get out there, buy water, and then create rules so that it would go where it was critically needed. And we bought almost 800,000 acre-feet of water, and it went to areas that were critically needed. Southern California got 215,000 acre-feet of that water. So if you stop and think about it, 25 years ago, rationing was your job as local agencies. The state's job was supply augmentation. I think I rather like that division of labor, and we have flipped it on its head for this drought. And by the way, that drought was a call to action. You have collectively invested $20 billion. By the way, not just Southern California. I know you like to think you're way ahead of those northerners, but they've been doing a lot of the same stuff. They're not quite as good at storage as you are, but they're working on it. And so if you fast forward to where we were in 2014 and 2015, you didn't declare rationing. Why? Because you developed alternative sources of supply. You didn't have a shortfall. Frankly, if I'd known then what I know now, I would have been out here talking about messaging differently than we did. Because we were sending a message of complacence when the people in the governor's office were reaching for their panic buttons. They didn't like the fact that we were complacent, although we had paid to be complacent. And the next thing we knew, we were all on a share of the pain bus. And quite frankly, I walked onto that bus and took my seat. How could you not want to share the pain? Everybody has to do something, even if you're prepared or you're not prepared. And within a few months, I began to realize I don't like this formula very well. But it had taken. It was being pushed by staff at the State Water Resources Control Board, and it was compelling stuff. And the next thing you know, you've got the state making rationing decisions. It's happening everywhere. It doesn't need to happen hardly anywhere. And instead of supply augmentation, which is what we were doing with the state 25 years ago. We've got supply diminishment because they're forcing you to take your local resources off the table and not making it easier to get water through the market. Indeed, a lot of my friends in places that would like to sell water, which was deeply unpopular in my early days, they're now having to ration water, which they don't need to because they've got adequate supplies. But the people of up in Yuba County were for a while looking at brown lawns. Well, their agency wanted to continue selling water, and there's local foment going on. There's a whole reason not to like where we are right now, but we are where we are. If you look at the order that came out, a number of you were up there participating. If you look at the order that came out, I think it's bad policy for 2016. I'm probably not going to be focusing on that. I'm going blue, June. I'm going blue. That's a private joke. And not referring to the color of your dress either. But the order also contains, if it's making bad policy in 2016, it's got very good language that we might have written. We didn't. It was written by people in the governor's office that we're talking to. That says that's short term. In the long term, we have to have this balanced policy that accounts for drought resilient investments by locals, and that's really important. But we'll worry about that in the future with the long term policy, and that's where we need to turn our attention to that long term policy, which, by the way, needs to be written by the Department of Water Resources, not by the State Water Resources Control Board. I think the State Board is asserting things that are not their job. We need to get that job back in the hands of the Department of Water Resources. We need to work very carefully together to be out there ahead of that curve and figuring out something that works better for us than what we've experienced over the last year. My guy, Dave Boland, will be up to his eyeballs in it. Many of you work with Dave. He's extraordinarily capable. So, again, I'm not sure if there'll be lawsuits or some agencies that are obviously posturing to perhaps file a suit against the State Board. I don't think I'd encourage you to do that. I'm not going to discourage you either, but I don't want to get drugged back into what happened in 2015. I want to look forward to what's going to happen in 2017, 2018, and beyond. So again, this was not a pleasant year. Our vehicle, the vehicle California Water took some damage, but we can repair it and get it back on the road, and that's what we need to do. Now I want to turn to long-term stuff and with a few items quickly. You all know you've got to respect a person's backyard politics. My backyard politics is the entire state of California. The only thing that works with my board of directors is a comprehensive policy that works for the whole state. So when you guys have something you really care about as Southern Californians, you'll hear from me, okay, as long as it's part of a comprehensive policy that's working for the state. And I say the same thing in the Bay Area or the San Joaquin Valley or in Southern California. We are truly the shepherds of a comprehensive solution to California's water policy. And you know what? Nothing's going to move unless it's comprehensive. If you try to move the parts independently, everybody fights each other, nothing moves. ACWA demonstrates that if you hold people together on a comprehensive program, you can move, and that's what we intend to do. A lot of you were active when we did our statewide water action plan. We called it the SWAP, and the governor has a California water action plan. Guess what? Looks a lot like ours. There's a reason for that. We were the bees going back and forth between flowers, not just ACWA, but our member agencies. Pushing the governor to a position where to get away, frankly, from a tunnels-only policy onto a comprehensive policy. And we had an event on January 14 in Sacramento that I think largely says we have succeeded in that. Because that event actually happened because the Brown administration came to ACWA and said they wanted us to work with them, and we basically orchestrated the whole thing, co-sponsored it with them, and they wanted to brand themselves differently as not the tunnels-only administration, but as an administration that's about comprehensive policy. And frankly, that meant a lot to me. It's something we had been working on for a long time. Never mind that when the governor got cornered by the media, the only thing anybody talked about were the tunnels. And I think, frankly, his staff needs to work on how he's dealing with the media. But California is certainly on the track of a comprehensive set of solutions, and I think that's good. What ACWA does is, with that umbrella established, I work with my board and with our members to figure out where can we be most effective moving the balls forward that need to be moved forward. And we'll talk very briefly about 5 of those balls that we're trying to move forward. Article 10. I know that there are different views in this room about that. Sigma implementation, not a huge issue for you, and I won't stand on it for too long. Some of our water marketing activities, storage, and headwaters, which you care about more than you might think. On Article 10, Ladies and gentlemen, for us, it's all about choice. It's about choice and discretion for our member agencies. And under current law, those choices are prescribed. Thanks. Did I seem like I needed water? I guess I've seen that way for several decades now. I'd like 200,000 acre feet at $125 per acre foot. Thank you very much. Currently, our members' choices are being curtailed in several different ways. One of them, I'm not sure how it affects all the agencies in this room, but stormwater is becoming a big deal in California because of ever more stringent Clean Water Act regulations. And for reasons that nobody has explained to my satisfaction, under current law, different types of infrastructure face different rules about how you interface with your public. If you're doing water or sewer infrastructure, you have to go through that clumsy Prop 218 process where you explain to your ratepayers what you're doing. You send them a mailer. They can protest back. If you get too many protests, you have to stop. That's fairly costly, although not terribly costly, it seems to me. And I don't know that it has stopped things from moving forward very often. If you need to invest in stormwater recapture system or flood control, you don't get that process. You have to go to the voters for a 2/3 vote, which creates a very, very steep hill. So you are caught between a rock and a hard place. The rock is the need to comply with very expensive legislation and build infrastructure, and the hard place is the voting public, in which it's really tough to get a 2/3 vote. What we're trying to do with what we've proposed with the League of Cities and with CSAC is to put all infrastructure on a level playing field. It all plays by the same rules. Everyone has to go through the protest process. Excuse me. That was created back in 1996. I would emphasize, by the way, we are taking as much of that accountability as we can that was built in to Proposition 218. You won't hear me use that number very often because we want to focus people on what we're working on, and we're not doing anything to Proposition 218. Two other problems that we're trying to work on, probably the most controversial one with this group is tiered rates. I know some of you think they're really important. Some of you think they're a communist plot by the devil to undermine the American way of life. And I want to create a world, and you're all free to choose whatever you want to choose. But the San Juan Capistrano case made it very clear tiered rates are legal but heavily constrained by the strict proportionality requirements that were put there in 1996. So we're trying to loosen those constraints but only for the purposes of tiered rates or lifeline rates to your lower income customers. So the strategy that we're pursuing, the talk began about, well, we need to change Prop 218. It didn't take me very long to figure out. I didn't want to change Prop 218. I have members who are fine with Proposition 218. That's how they're justifying their rates today. That's how they want to justify their rates in the future. And I pretty quickly swung around to voting against changing Proposition 218. I was helped by the polls, which said any head-on charge against 218 was going to fail. And so a strategic decision was made. Let's leave Proposition 218 in place. Let's create an alternative finance track. Take the inherent accountability features of Proposition 218, which require you to make the case that your revenues are justified by the cost you need to incur to do business. Although that remains intact, if you want to use these new provisions for stormwater recapture system, you've got to go through the nexus test. You've got to go through the protest procedure. You've got to do everything you have to do under current law. The one change is when you interface with your ratepayers, you do it through the protest process as opposed to 2/3 vote at the ballot box. And similarly, for only the limited purposes of tiered rate pricing for conservation purposes and lifeline rates for low-income customers, you get a break from the strict proportionality requirements that are now in existing law. We've loosened them for you so that you can, if you choose, you can do so much more easily than under existing law. The most important thing I want to tell you is it's all about discretion. My board was a little worried that Quinn was getting out ahead of them, and so they formed an advisory committee. A number of people in this room are on that advisory committee. That committee worked very well. Larry McKinney is the chair of it. Another person I ought to note is Paul Barkowitz, a noted a water attorney from Northern California. And it became clear to me when my board approved this as a policy, several of them raised their legal concerns about how this might be exposing them to risk, and the economist said, well, I've talked to the attorneys and they said it's okay. That was not good enough for Paul Barkowitz, and bless him for that. And so we really had a rigorous process of going through what are the risk factors, how can we deal with them. That led to changes in the initiative, which have now been made. They accepted every change that we asked, so we're moving forward. I'm not sure where this is going to go. We filed an initiative, then we amended it based on comments we're getting from you and others. We will have title and summary language from the Attorney General's office, I think next week or the week after. At that time, we will immediately go to the polls. Our polling on this issue tells us everything depends upon what the voters reading in the ballot summary, and we won't have a good flavor for that until we get title and summary from the AG. And when we have that, we will sit down with some of you, with the governor's folks, and decide where we go from here. This could be headed to the November ballot, and it could be headed towards the waiting room. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see how things develop. Let me move on. I quickly want to talk about SGMA, one of the best managed groundwater basins on the planet. You didn't have a lot at risk when SGMA was passed. That wasn't true for a lot of other groundwater basins, but I do want to talk a little bit about how SGMA can touch your world, I think, in favorable ways. From ACWA's perspective, we took a lot of political risks supporting that legislation, but we went all out. For us, the fact that something needed to be done was a given. We wanted to make sure local agencies were in charge of doing it, which means we were putting local agencies in charge of making some really difficult decisions. But we preferred that locals make those decisions as opposed to the state. We held a series of workshops around the state with CSAC and the California Water Foundation. Now they're just Water Foundation. I don't know why they decided they didn't like California. But Lester decided to drop the California from the name of his foundation. And we're not doing a lot on GSA, groundwater sustainability agencies. We're not interfacing a lot, though. That's the hardest decision that the locals have to make under this new law. But they're doing it themselves, going through the hard local politics. I didn't see that ACWA had a lot of value added there, so we're not added much there. Where we are focused is something that was in SGMA. There's very few things where I put my feet down and say, I got to have this because I think it's important as the executive director of ACWA. There's a provision of SGMA that requires the Department of Water Resources to do a report due at the end of this year that will tell Californians that manage groundwater if the governor's program is implemented or not. There may be several alternatives. How much wet period replenishment water can you expect to be available for your groundwater basins? And that was important to me then because SGMA couldn't just be about restricting pumping at the local level. It had to be about loosening this system for replenishment during wet periods. And this study is one of the steps in the strategy to put a focus on that. And a number of you probably heard me before say, I'm so tired of arguing about how much outflow the Delta Smelt needs. I don't want that to be the question that guides the Center of California policy. I much prefer the question of how do we get sustainable groundwater basins in the year 2040 with healthy economies overlying them. And that implies the locals have to make the hard choices. But more importantly, the state has got to do its job and fix this system so that when it's got water to give, we can get it down into groundwater basins. It's that old, Don, thank you for mentioning Wiley Horn. I think fondly of Wiley every day. And that's almost literally true. But one of Wiley's concepts was move the lake south. He saw the lake starting up in Shasta, and he wanted a policy that he was very into storage at the local level because the states weren't going to do it. And for Wiley, it was moving the lake south, and that's what we need to do to manage our groundwater basins over the long term. And that will have a favorable impact on you by focusing state policy on wet period replenishment, not just dry period restrictions in pumping. Let me move briefly to water markets. Most of you know I'm an economist by training. I was hired by a man named Carl Baranke over 30 years ago now, and his passion was the water market, and he wanted an economist that could advise him on how to help create water marketing in California. That was my job for about 15 years, and he didn't tell me what he was getting me into. But today we've got a functional market, but I'm not going to go much farther beyond that. You have to be a big player like the Metropolitan Water District, and East Bay Mud. They have all got Steve Hirsch is the Tim Quinn in Northern California now, but you need to Steve Hirsch or Tim Quinn to be functioning out there in the market by and large. And my hat's off to locals like Irvine Ranch Water District that have been out there bravely as Southern California entities trying to do this at the sub-wholesaler level, which frankly, in the future, I believe you'll see more of, not less of. The market now is characterized by pretty high transactions costs. It's not transparent. There's a lot that we can do to improve it. And this partly came about on my board from a strategic consideration to get if you sit down with Felicia Marcus, you won't get 20 minutes into the conversation without her saying, but what if it's an 8-year drought or a 12-year drought? And I think our response to that needs to be, let's make the market work. That's the best way to deal with increasing shortage if we are in a long drought. And the worst way is to give them more power to regulate the system. I think we want to turn in a big way towards not just fine-tuning, but taking a major leap on improving the water market in the state of California. There's a lot of interest in doing that. I think you're going to see, you're probably going to want to pay attention to this. There's going to be a major move, whether we liked it or not, and I kind of like it, on water marketing legislation in the California legislature this year. They're likening it to groundwater, which is, again, not something I'm discouraging, because in groundwater it was a very collaborative process. ACWA had a very loud voice, and I would like to have the same thing happen. We've got a technical advisory committee working on a set of principles. Several people in this room are very active on that, and I thank them for that. And I took it to the board in sort of abbreviated fashion, because I didn't think we were ready for a decision at a board meeting that happened last week. But I'm going to take it to them in March and ask them for a decision, and use the draft as a guide. In the meantime, there will be major legislation on water marketing, and I think we can live in a world where instead of a few dozen players in the water market on the demand and supply side, there are a few hundred. And there's a lot of interest, as I mentioned, in the Brown administration and with key legislative leaders. It's going to be an important activity in California in 2016. Storage, we're all about storage. Storage to my northern Californians is really important to think of storage and conveyance in the same thought, because the storage brings a supply resource to the table that makes them feel not threatened the way they are if you proceed on Delta conveyance solutions without supply elements to it. I mean, that's what drives the Northern Californians to concern. The main activity, we're doing two things at ACWA on storage. We've become very effective working with the California Water Commission. They're going to allocate $2.7 billion under Chapter 8 of Proposition 1, passed 2-1 by the voters in November of 2014. And we're very active in the regulatory formation process and those sorts of things. But what kindles my interest a little bit more, we've got a group, we call it the Water Storage Integration Work Group. This is essentially the proponents of all the storage projects that will seek money from Chapter 8. And they check their weapons at the door, come into our conference room, and they've hired a modeler, and they're trying to figure out how much better would it be if you actually integrated these projects instead of leave them each in their silos, which is the way we have tended to look at them in the past. Integrate them not just with each other, but with the existing system, most importantly with groundwater basins, not just in the San Joaquin Valley, but I'm thinking Southern California as well. And if you start investing in storage from a truly integrated perspective, I think we're going to be able to put will cause your mouth to drop open estimates as to how much value there could be in that for California. And not coincidentally, we want this to feed into DWR's end-of-the-year report about what kind of replenishment water could be available for sustainable groundwater basins if we play our cards right and implement the governor's comprehensive plan. Last, to prove that we are truly the comprehensive people. We care about everything from groundwater at sea level to headwaters at 12 to 14,000 feet. We have a headwaters working group. This has become a high priority activity in my board of directors a strategic plan, and Steve Lamar's not here, but he was actually the chair of our work group. I love the fact that it was an urban Southern Californian that was the chair. He's now moved on to be the chair of the Federal Affairs Committee, and the chairmanship of our Headwaters work group is a fellow who, if I wasn't here today, I would be with Secretary Vlasic on Mare Island, because ACWA was invited to a meeting to talk about headwaters policy with the Forestry Service, and Dave Egerton, who's heading that effort for us now, and he's the he has your old job, I think, June. Yeah, the general manager of the Calif County Water District. So I'm not going to say anything other than we care a lot about this for us. And one reason we care is it's a place where I don't know how big it is, but I'm quite certain that there are water supply and water quality benefits from managing them better. I don't think you need that to get me interested in it. Our forests are in terrible shape. They're not healthy. We need to make them healthy. And ACWA is trying to be part of that both in the federal government and the state government. I think I probably talked longer than I wanted. But that's what I've got for you. I'll be glad to talk about any of those items or anything else you want to talk about. So I've never come into this room without a lot of questions, so let's see how you do. Yes, sir.
All right. Back on the whole business of the rationing and the variation in allocation and all that, how do you deal with it when there are no meters in places? You say I got, say, 25%, for example, and Ackerman
I don't think you can manage without meters, and they're all going to have them.
how do you do it now? What's fair about this process?
Well, most places are moving to meters pretty fast. When we got that bill passed, I was still at Metropolitan. When we got that bill passed, Darrell Steinberg was relatively new as the president pro tem, and to get around Darrell, we had they had until 2025. This was, which we thought in Southern California was kind of ridiculous. But they're going to beat that target. They're planning on having all their meters installed by 2020. Meanwhile, they're doing the same stuff you're doing. They have limited day irrigation of their lawns, and they send out people to patrol the streets. And if you're irrigating on the wrong day, they slap you with a fine. And all those cities, even the cities that don't have meters, have been reducing their water use fairly substantially. They're all meeting their targets. So even though they don't have meters, they're weighing in, and they're forced to have meters. Most of them are not being forced. They realize they need the meters for their own management purposes. So it's happening. Your indignation is not without some justice, I would point out. Yes, Paul.
Thanks for coming here, Tim, and thanks for your really good testimony at the state board on Tuesday. One thing you talked about was drought resilient supplies, and from a water management perspective, I believe they're shared the same theory that really didn't fully acknowledge drought resilient supplies. It sends a very strong economic signal to water managers to, if you think you're investing in water reliability, you may not, because the state might take it away from you in the drought. And then also, in talking to a number of general managers, a lot of people are talking about increasing their next time they do a rate increase, putting more of that on the meter charge, so it's fixed. So the state's also saying shift your revenue to fixed charges because we may also ask you to cut back in the future. So as a water economist, I would like to hear your comments on kind of the economic signal that these regulations are sending.
I strongly agree with your conclusion, Paul. If people believe, local decision makers believe that all future droughts will be managed the way this one is, the incentives for investing in the drought resiliency go way down, which is why we have to break that mold. And we need to work together to do that. We cannot allow that perception to last. And if I was I was working my tail off the last couple of months. I thought it was interesting. The governors, I'm not going to name names or get specific, but the folks you would meet with, higher ups in the Brown administration, they got to where they could do our arguments better than we could. They got it. They got your argument. But the chair of the state board had dug her heels in so deep that it was going to take such a huge political lift. And she's a person of some notoriety. And by the way, a friend of mine, I've known and admired this person for many, many years. I think they just came to the conclusion that it wasn't worth it for the next 6 months to go through the political warfare with the environmentalists to uproot this thing. But the words that you're seeing in the resolution that say in the future it can't be the way it was this year, we have to make them count. By the way, I'm not sure how to handle this. We have an outreach challenge amongst us because part of our problem is our public has been led to believe that they gave us all this money and we weren't ready. and that we weren't doing the right thing, so the state had to step in and make us do the right thing. Somehow we have to try and unring that bell too. Because as I said in my remarks, we have to transition from a battle that we frankly lost over 2015 and 2016. We didn't know we needed to fight it until well into 2015. We need to turn that in. That doesn't mean we've lost the war. I think we will win the war, but we're going to have to make sure that when the governor's new drought policy is in place, it looks very different from what we did this year, and they are acknowledging that and saying this is the way to go, not that. And your argument's the strongest for why they have to do that. If they don't do that, if it's just veneer, if it's just it's not really sincere, I don't know how you guys are going to get your boards to approve those expensive projects in the future. And that's what we've been telling them. All of us been telling them. Yes, sir. Over in the back over here.
Thanks for being here today. I enjoyed listening to you. I agree with almost everything you say. But I just have a question on, you talked about you supporting tiered rates for conservation purposes and subsidized rates, and I was wondering if you could tell me why. The reason why tiered rates for conservation purposes sounds like a violation of Prop 15B, but I can also see that it makes it easier than giving restrictive rules on when you can water, or that we just charge you if you go over or something. But I mean, I'd like to
Well, let me emphasize in the strongest possible terms, I am not advocating tiered rates. I am advocating discretion and choice at the local level. Some of my members are not going to go to tiered rates. Some of them will go to tiered rates. I want all of those members to have the ability to implement the choices of their boards of directors. I'm not advocating tiered rates. I'm advocating choice at the local level.
I just thought when you said for conservation purposes, that meant a penalty rate, just added it to make people use less water that didn't tie into the cost. I thought that
Well, again, in principle, I'm not defending or advocating anything, but the evidence, I wouldn't use the word penalty. The evidence shows that if you implement a revenue-neutral tiered rate, it does reduce water use. People respond to it. I'm an economist. People respond to price signals. I don't think that that's a penalty. And some agencies want to use that signal as part of their conservation program. Others point out, I spent much of my Met career ignoring price signals. I didn't think they were the way to get conservation to happen. So we were structuring the conservation credits program and the local resources program. Those were not retail pricing strategies because we thought that would be more effective. And I agree it's got to be a combination of the two. What I'm about is giving my agencies freedom to choose how they want to put that together. And those that want to use tiered rates now are heavily constrained, and we're trying to loosen those constraints while absolutely protecting the discretion of those that don't want to go in that direction. Yes. Art.
Thank you, Jim. Following up on that, we have had this last year the greatest loss of control over water policy in the history of the state.
I agree. And I lament it, and I agree, but I think we can get it back.
Every time I've heard Felicia talk, it's like, when it's over, it's over. But within a few sentences later, it's the new normal. And so I'm a little bit frightened by the idea of putting anything like pricing regarding him. Because last year, one of the first things that happened when a number of agencies didn't meet their targets was an order from the state board to get a rate study done and consider pricing their water in order to achieve conservation. Well, if that's in Article 10 to have that choice, I think there's a real danger, and I like your thought, that the new normal will be that the state tells the locals how to exercise that choice.
Let me try and respond to you this way, Art. I don't think we can respond to the new normal by saying, oh, there's not a new normal. Let's do the old normal. We have to go with the new normal. What I think we should do with the new normal is focus it on setting the bar very high for us in establishing water use efficiency. We should set the bar as high as we can, consistent with something with reasonableness, and we need to make it very clear that we are moving the bar up for efficiency, and that is a part of our new normal. Water use efficiency at levels that are higher than they were in the past. I think that's where we need to go to get them off of wanting to tell us in detail other things. And by the way, in future droughts, I think we want a set of rules that make it very clear. We're all about a new normal that's efficient. The new normal for water use mostly is outdoors. I don't know, I think many of you have supported, ACWA supported the new outdoor regulations, standards, whatever you call them, for new development. It's not unlike 1991 and 92. When we all supported low flow standards, there were national standards passed for shower heads and for toilets. You couldn't buy a 3.5 gallon toilet anymore. 1.6. We supported that, all of us, to change the water using characteristics of the new housing stock, and then we dealt with incentive programs to get to the retrofitted stock. I think we should do the same sort. We are doing the same sort of strategy with outdoor water use. So we should make it very clear we're setting new standards. We believe in a new normal. We want a high level of efficiency. And then if we're achieving that efficiency, pardon my language, get the hell out of my life, State Water Resources Control Board. And right now they come in, I like to, Felicia didn't appreciate this little lecture that I gave her in private, but I was making the point that flushing my toilet every time is a beneficial use of water, darn it. Letting the shower run continuously for a reasonable amount of time is a beneficial use of water. I've probably got $100,000 invested in a landscape, and keeping it healthy with irrigation is a beneficial use of water. Now, back 25 years ago, we were so short of supplies, we had to ask people to forego beneficial uses of water, and they did. And what we found is if you confuse them about the facts, they're willing to do that again today. But if you've got sustainable water supplies in place, you should be allowed to meet those reasonable and beneficial uses of water, and the state shouldn't be able to interfere with you. And we need to establish that as the direction for the future. Doug?
Yeah, Tim, building on Art's question, I'm afraid the new normal is we've created this monster organization. It's like Pac-Man. It's just eating up everything. I don't think you can ease my concern going forward. What the new normal is going to be whatever Felicia tells, or whoever is in her place tells it's going to be. And I just don't think they're ever going to let go of that power that they have.
I think we've got an awful lot to say about what the new normal looks like. Local agencies in California, if we stay together through ACWA and I work closely with the League of Cities and others, then they'll be in the same place we are. We can define what new normal looks like. You all know me to be an optimist, right? I've got a reputation in that regard. So I feel, and even if you turn out to be wrong, you feel so much better in the interim by being an optimist. But Doug, I agree that the staff of the state board, they've had their way over the last year. We need to make sure that it ends, and we do that by asserting ourselves to define the new normal in a way that is really everybody. We're all about good policy, and the new normal misinterpreted is about bad policy, and I think we can win that argument.
And I think part of our concern comes from the fact that the state board has had these regions that they just do whatever they want to do, and the state board has had very little control over some of their decisions and the way they operate, and they're not uniform. If you're in a bad region, you're in trouble, and I worry about where that power is going to get down to them too.
Mr. Dick?
Thank you, sir. I too would join the Legion of fans. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Really enchanted by your pure backyard politics. I think we all agree with what we see depends on where you sit. Unfortunately, where a lot of people sit, they don't have a backyard, they don't have a front yard. They live in condos because it's the lifestyle they've chosen, and they believe perhaps that they should choose that for us as well. Hence your concerns about central government versus local control, which is why we all applaud ACWA, CSBA, to give us a chance to have some kind of a voice. And I ask you to continue so to do, but at the same time we're having all of these conversations this morning, I'd like to ask you to shift just a little and give us the benefit of your thinking, from your position, and from your experience on what's going to happen with the Salton Sea, because I have great concerns about what that's going to do, even though it's not in our backyard.
I'm not going to try and predict Robert Hertzberg. But on the Salton Sea, frankly, to be perfectly honest, it's not really it's not in the center of our wheelhouse, and it could be. If you guys want it to be more important, bring that into my boards. My board is going to have a retreat on their strategic plan, and I talk with the Salton Sea people. We try to offer what support we can. I think almost every time they come to maybe not every time, but frequently when they come to Sacramento, we sit down and we talk. In Cindy Tuck and my team will offer some device, but we don't put a lot of resources into it. And that can be changed by going through my board's strategic planning process. The other one, and they're going to be doing that again in the next month or two. Larry, I would really encourage you to talk to your folks who are active in ACWA and say, you think ACWA should be more involved in the strategic plan in the Salton Sea, and the best way to accomplish that is by getting the Region 8, 9, and 10 representatives on that board saying, we think this is important, you should pay attention to it. It'll get on my strategic plan, and I'll be able to put more resources into it.
Tim, I just want to announce Urban Water is having a panel on the Salton Sea a week from, next Thursday in Palm Springs. Maybe someone from your office would come down.
Send me an email.
I will.
Send me an email, and I'll see if I can't do that. And I'm aware that they're developing plans that, the plans they had 5 years ago didn't seem to me to be anything more than a hope and a prayer.
A couple of years ago, until the governor is interested.
And they seem to be heading in. Well, I think you're catching the Brown administration's attention, and I think partly because the plans are getting. Again, I don't pretend to be an expert on the issue, but the plans are getting more feasible.
Yes.
Susan, and then behind Susan.
Tim, in your opinion, how effectively are special water districts working together with cities to address all of the issues that we're facing? And are there some ways that you might suggest that we could be more effective, but if we're not as effective as we could be?
We're really working hard at keeping those local, the local governments together. I spend a lot of time with Chris McKenzie, who's my counterpart at the California League of Cities, and with Matt Cate, who's my counterpart at CSAC. The Article 10 stuff we did as a trio. I don't much like this, but my staff calls this the bromance. That should have gotten more of a chuckle. So there are very short, frequently used lines of communication between the special districts, at least ACWA's water agencies, and the cities and the counties. We have an extraordinarily good working relationship. We respect each other. We know that we have some differences, but we're working hard to be on the same page. And I don't hesitate to pull CSAC or the league into issues that are in my bailiwick a little more than theirs, and they don't hesitate to ask us for help similarly. So I think it's working pretty well. You can always do more, but it's not like we're ignoring each other. We spend a lot of time working together, communicating with each other, and trying to come up with joint positions representing a pretty impressive coalition of local government in California. Yes?
And what do you feel can be done to go and make the water markets work better?
If shoot me an email, and I'll send you the draft we've got. You might also talk to Paul Workhorst or Mr. Cook at Irvine Ranch Water District. They've been very active on our TAC. The TAC has come up with a large number of recommendations. Some of them are pretty simple no-brainers. Consolidate place of use. I mean, that TAC's asking itself questions like, why do we even have place of use? If we're going to start focusing on a market, why do you restrict the place and use of something on a piece of paper? Why don't you make it more easy for those molecules to go to different places and to different uses? Probably the biggest change that's being discussed is establishing some sort of clearinghouse that would make it much, much easier to process a proposed transfer through the system, because currently, again, you need to have very capable staff out there building relationships. Some markets, that's fine. I'd like to have something where you didn't have to have a Tim Quinn or Steve Hirsch out there. So a clearinghouse is probably the most powerful thing that could be done to significantly lower the transactions costs. We're trying to make it much less costly for buyers and sellers to find each other, and much faster and cheaper to get through the approval process than is true today. Yeah, Carl.
Tim, can you share your thoughts on the California water fix, how that's going, what you see happening, especially with Governor Brown's term ending. Give us a little background and prognostication of where you see that.
I'll do what I can, but I'll defer to some of the Met folks here, too. You got a brief report from Linda. Look, for us, the water fix, we have never embroiled ourselves in should there be 3 intakes or 2 or 5, or is it 3,000 CFS or 9,000 CFS or 12,000 CFS. I frankly have made sure ACWA is not engaged in those decisions, and I don't think we should be. Our perspective on the water fix is it must be part of a comprehensive program. And we've demonstrated that we can deliver massive, broad support for the water fix as long as it's moving forward as part of a comprehensive program. I do, I know frankly, the famous Quinn optometer is a little bit down on the fix this year, but that doesn't mean, I frankly think, I don't know what sane person that knows anything about California water, can anybody think that the intakes are in the right place in the Delta? The intakes are in the wrong place in the Delta. And we've got such an ability to confuse a debate about the Delta. It's just about where do you put your intake and what are the benefits and costs of where that intake is. It was never about more supply for you guys, by the way. And tragically, it became a discussion about supply, which I don't think logically it was. It was always an issue, at least from my perspective. I worked on these issues for 25 years, as you all know, and I can't tell you how much better I feel these days because the Delta is only 10% of my life instead of 150% of my life. And I sleep better at night. This is the year to push for a decision. And I had breakfast just the other day with Randy Record, and he said, well, will ACWA stand up and support it? And I said, I can't guarantee that, but if you give me something to support, I will take it to my board. And as long as I can tell them that it's an important part of a comprehensive program, I think there's a good chance that you can get ACWA support. Whether they can get it that far or not, I don't know. I mean, this is the year. This is Governor Jerry Brown's second year of his last 4-year term. He's absolutely dedicated to it. It is in his genes. Again, I wish that he wouldn't just talk about the tunnels, but after he gave his remarks at the ACWA Brown administration event on the 14th, I was escorting the governor out of the hall to down the hall, and he was, of course, accosted by reporters. I mean, there were reporters everywhere. We got very good media coverage for this thing, and he went right down to a pungent little defense of his tunnels, and he did just what Linda did today. He said, if those tunnels were in place today, we could be pumping at 9,000 CFS and turning the pumps down to whatever minimal number they were. So he certainly got it. And early in his tenure, I bumped into the governor at Granzella's, which, if you don't know Granzella's, you should. Granzella's is in Williams, California, on Interstate 5, about 90 miles north of Sacramento. I was up there sitting down with a board member, an ACWA board member, having breakfast with him, and who bounces in? The governor of California. And he's about 2 months into his term. And but by the way, his family owns a ranch up there, and he spends a fair amount of time up in Williams. And I'm not the best friend of the governor, but he knew that he kind of sort of knew me, and I went up and introduced myself. And the next thing I knew, he was launching into this from the heart talk about how did I know that his father had built a state water project? And I said, yes, sir, I did. But what impressed me, you don't very often get a chance to do your elevator speech like this. Because my closing comment in what was a 3 or 4 minute discussion was, yes, sir, your father built it, and now you need to make it sustainable. And I really think that he's got that as a calling. So, again, right now, people are so confused about it. They've turned it into a water grab again. The public outreach part of this is really a challenge. The regulators aren't with you. I mean, I think that's a huge shame. The regulators, both the state and federal biological regulators, they should be doing anything they can to move that intake. It's one of the most important things you can do, but they also get wrapped up in the water grab mentality, and they don't want to let go of their control of that little trickle of water that they think is going to solve the problem. So that's going against you too. But if it's ever going to happen, it's going to happen this year. Well, I don't want to be. If it doesn't happen this year, you'll be a long time waiting. Brett.
Tim, looking at the federal legislation, what can ACWA do to keep Feinstein
on the same page as everybody else. This is 2 straight times where she's agreed to a deal and has had to walk it back because Senator Boxer has de facto veto authority. What kind of pressure can ACWA put on Senator Feinstein to support not only the legislation but also what the administration signed off on in the most recent?
Well, through our Federal Affairs Committee, through Dave Reynolds and other contacts, we keep pressing what we want as a bipartisan deal. We want we want something that both the Republicans in the House and the Democrats in the Senate can vote for. We frankly can't pound them over the head and say, well, do this and you can all agree with each other. So we wind up taking a supportive amended position on all the bills that come to us and then urging bipartisan support. But in the end, we can't force them to agree with each other. We can tell them we're not going to support anything until we have bipartisan agreement, and that's how we've tried to position ourselves. Yes, sir.
It is.
You mentioned storage briefly, the Chapter 8 of Prop 1.
Yeah.
Where do you realistically see that $2 billion go? We here in Southern California are fortunate enough to have storage now. Where do you see that going across the state?
To be determined. ACWA, and there's a range of views on this. There's a lot of people in the San Joaquin Valley that said when the voters voted on that, they really were voting for just 2 projects, Sites and Temperance Flat. That's never been ACWA's view. By the way, it wasn't our view when I was negotiating those provisions back in 2009. What we wanted was a competitive process for a new brand of storage that would be different than the old brand of storage. And I think you will see that money go to a wide variety of projects. It'll go some to above ground, some to below ground. It'll be spread geographically around the state of California because a lot of different places in California can do different things for what we call co-equal goals and have trouble getting through the system. The Sites Reservoir guys, they are doing really well. Again, by the way, I won't advocate any particular project. That's not wise for an association head. But I will observe for you that the people who are trying to advance sites, they get modern storage the way MWD did back in the day when we were building a lot of storage, and I was a big part of that. So I think sites has got a good shot at it. Temperance Flat, less so. They haven't got the genes of the modern age, at least not yet, and they're disorganized locally. And sometimes it's kind of like they think that when we passed Prop 1 with Chapter 8 and that Santa Claus was going to drop a finished reservoir in their backyard. That ain't going to happen. What you've got is the opportunity to work your tail off and get storage happening, but it's in your hands locally. One of the more innovative projects, and this is just the kind of thing I wanted to see happen when we negotiated these terms, God, it's been 7 years ago now, is there's a project to develop a surface storage project in the bottom of the Tulare Lake. Any of you guys familiar with this? It's actually something that I toyed with when I worked at MWD. There was Pierre is shaking his head, so he'll tell me where the thing is wrong. But I like the concept. The Tulare Lake is just a big bowl. What did it used to do? It used to catch floodwaters, and then they decided to turn it into farmland. And when they're not suffering from drought, they're working like crazy to keep the floodwaters out. And the concept here is stop farming that land, let the floodwaters come in, hook it up to the delta. I like to think of these sorts of things as parking lots. And again, whether this one works or not, I don't know enough about the technical detail, but I am a huge fan of parking lots, surface storage facilities that can take water in high volumes when the delta has it to give, park it for 6 months until you can get it into a groundwater basin, empty that facility out, and wait for the next surge. And by the way, when you look at long-term yield, the environmentalists love this. I mean, that facility should be empty when the big drought comes because you want all the water to be in a groundwater basin someplace. It should be empty. It's not going to give you any direct deliveries during an extended drought. So the environmentalists pop up and say, see, the dollars per acre feet of yield are astronomical. You shouldn't be building these things. But that's not the way to look at it. So I think Chapter 8 of Proposition 1 is going to do just what we wanted it to do. It's creating a lot of innovative entrepreneurial thought about how locals can build storage that benefits them, but everybody knows you're not going to build a storage project that just benefits you. You've got to build a storage project for multiple purposes, and what we did with Proposition 1 was create some public money that would pay for the benefits that are not going to accrue directly to your ratepayers. Yes, Larry. you help me with the dates. We got our D.C. conference. It's like the third week of February. What? 23rd, 24th, in there. Washington, D.C., come. And then the spring conference is the first week or so of May. Thank you, Mary Eileen. That first week of May in Monterey. We're back in Monterey. Heads up, they're doing hotel renovation in Monterey, so it's not going to be quite the Monterey that you're used to, but they're doing a lot of things to accommodate us and make sure we have a good experience, even though there will be some construction activity going on in the convention center. Pierre.
Hey, Tim, two things. First of all, you talked about groundwater storage as part of the bond, but this is the public benefit portion of, explain to me what you see the public benefit, public use of groundwater storage. I'm not saying it's not extremely important, because it is, but, I understand in a reservoir we have recreational use of fishing or habitat around the edge. There are arguments for that, but explain what you see the public benefit, included in the bond.
Gives you the ability to do a lot more gulp sip. Gives you the ability to do a lot more gulp sip. It allows you to shift demands to wet periods in relative terms than dry periods by connecting your groundwater basins and your surface storage facilities together. By the way, I would suggest a groundwater project alone probably is not a strong competitor. A groundwater project tied to a surface storage project could be a very strong competitor, and I think make a public benefits case.
And the second thing in water transfers, what a lot of people run into in water transfers, you'll have a pre-1914 right. The property owner has that.
Mm-hmm.
I own a car. If I want to sell my car, the state isn't in a position to tell me I can't sell it to this guy or that guy. I just sell it. In water rights, the counties and cities get involved in it and say you can't do that, or you cannot move it out of this county. And that's been a major impediment to a lot of transfers. Is that being addressed by the task force?
Yeah, and again, your staff is up to their eyeballs in this, and it is a question that's being looked at. It's a delicate one for ACWA. We believe in local choice. So I don't quickly go to tell a local county that it can't decide, make decisions it thinks are relevant for its water future. So we're, trying, frankly, to balance things out. But that issue has been discussed, and I think that some things related to it are included in the list of recommendations. And I have to double check. Well, as I said, it's a delicate question for me to answer, Pierre, because I believe in local control. For what it was worth, when I was at MWD, I never wanted to go and say, you don't have the right to make those decisions. What I wanted to do was make Southern California an attractive enough partner to that local area that they saw it was in their interest to not impose those sorts of restrictions. And we succeeded in lots and lots of places. So I never felt strongly about going and telling the state to tell those places nobody can have those kinds of rules. I thought in a sort of political competition, but by being a good partner on the other side of the table, you could find plenty of areas that wanted to consummate trades for which that wasn't a problem. And I'm probably still going to lean in that direction. It'd be very difficult to get ACWA to come in and have the state impose those sorts of restrictions on how locals make decisions, unless you can develop some sort of policy criteria where they really are stepping in and interfering with statewide policy. But I think if we approach the market right, there will be plenty of areas that want to sit down and talk business with you. Look at the business model that Yuba County Water Agency's developed over the last 30 years. It's remarkable, and by and large, the locals supported it until the State Water Resources Control Board forced rationing on the people in Plumas Lakes when they didn't need to be rationed, and their lawns are going dry, and the farmers still want to market water to Southern California, but their locals, thanks to the State Water Resources Control Board, are in an uproar. How can you sell water to those people down on the other side of the Delta when you're forcing me to kill my lawn? Just another little example of why we're not quite on the right track in 2016. Mary Eileen?
Let's go back to the Headwaters group and
Yes.
and are they working with the Mountain Counties group, which is a pretty well-versed group that is looking at the forestry?
We work very closely with John and with the Mountain County Water Resource Association. Many of his members overlap with us. And in my staff, we have a working group on Headwaters that includes a lot of folks from coastal California. I'm very pleased about that. East Bay Mud's active. Irvine Ranch has been active. The city of San Diego has been active. And then almost all of my higher elevation members in the Sierra are very active. So, ACWA's doing what we do. We're pulling people that didn't usually communicate together, coming up with sensible policy about managing forests better.
Are they bringing in like the California fire?
Yep.
And entities such as that?
And it gets institutionally complex, but we have developed very active working relationship with CAL FIRE. I'm getting to know PIMLOT, and with U.S. Forest Service, and we're dividing our time between Washington, D.C., where we'd like to see legislation passed, because our federal forests are not managed appropriately for the long term. And my read is the folks out here, the higher-ups in the region, again, I would be in the U.S. Forest Service's regional office at this moment if I didn't rather be here. I think they want to go where we want to go. And on the state side, the governor's got his dead tree task force going, and we're involved in that as well. And again, the governor's coming in with, he's very concerned about all the dead trees that are out there as a result of the drought, and that's going to lead you to some sort of thinning activity that you want to be merged with making those forests healthier. We got to get rid of a lot of biomass in our forests. And the whole issue is how do you do that, and then what do you do with the biomass? Thanks. It's fun learning forests. It turns out forest politics is a lot like water politics. In water politics, it's water grab, and in the forest, it's clear cut.
Just you talk about what the governor is doing to try to move things along. What about the state legislature? What are they doing?
I probably could come. I can come up with a better. I can come up with a better answer if you give me more time. One of the things we want them to do this year, frankly, I give the legislature pretty high marks. I mean, we passed the 2009 legislation. That was a rough ride for ACWA, but it was the right thing to do. The groundwater legislation was done right, and it's the most important legislation in a century on California water. This year, we're going to focus them on water marketing, and I think we'll get it right here too. As I mentioned before, a lot of people in the Capitol are saying we need to deal with water marketing the way we did with groundwater 2 years ago. Make it a big deal, make it a collaborative process, figure out a way to make a quantum leap on an important public policy problem. So that's where we're going to be trying to focus energies in the legislature on the water marketing question. And while people like to joke about our legislators, in point of fact, we got a fairly good history with the legislature of getting good policy out of them. So let's keep doing it.
What about the Delta fix? I mean, whether we're going to build a tunnel, or do they want to interject themselves into that?
I don't see any desire on the part of the leadership of the state legislature. They did get involved. By the way, if anybody makes an issue of this, they did get involved in the Delta in 2009. And they laid down the criteria in 2009 for how you move forward. They've done their job. Thank you very much. I don't think that they're looking to interfere, and there's plenty of other people are. But Assemblywoman Eggman had a bill to subject the decision to a popular vote. You got the Court of Posse thing out there that has to be dealt with. By the way, ACWA is taking a formal position to oppose the Court of Posse initiative. I think we are north, south, east, west. We give that effort a lot of cover. It's not just about the tunnels. It's about really bad policy on how we finance infrastructure in the state of California. So, like I said, ACWA's not going to dive in and be at the front with the boxing gloves on for that Delta fix. We can be in the second or third row supporting you as long as it is truly part of a comprehensive solution that's moving forward. That's the price that I insist on. And if I don't have that, we leave the room entirely. But I think we do have that. That's where the governor of California is, and so again, let's reach for that brass ring. You might as well do it now. You're not going to get another good opportunity. This is the merry-go-round won't come around to that brass ring for another couple of decades. So I think you want to reach out there and try and grab it this year. I think I wore you out. Thank you very much. I always really enjoy coming down here. You always ask good questions, and a lot of them.
Yeah, you certainly had a lot of questions today.
Thanks very much.
Thanks for joining us, Jim.
Just a quick item. This on March 15th, will be held in April.